Okay. So good morning, everybody. We are continuing on with our study of Eruvin. We are now on Daf Samach Zayin with Aleph. We are at the two dots on the top. So just to give a quick brief sum up of yesterday. So yesterday we were talking about multiple people in the same courtyard. And the question, and living with non-Jews, the question is, what setup exactly would you be able to remedy with an Eruv when you could not, and some of the rules therein. So the rules that we mentioned were the fact that a non-Jew living with Jews, if there's multiple Jews, that creates a problem, or if there's one Jew, could also create a problem. We mentioned the issue of having access to the courtyard, potentially creating issues, that you have to have everybody who normally would use this courtyard has to include in your Eruv. And we also discussed the question of who can give up the rights, who can do bittul. So there we gave differentiating between between Jews, as well as non-Jews, as well as between different people and where you're situated in the courtyard. And could you say that we could make a group with that other person, or doing so create a problem? That's where we had paused. So now the two dots. We've got a new topic. So we start off with an interesting Agadic statement. So Rav Chisda v'Rav Sheshes ki page v'hadade Rav Chisda mirta'an siftote mimatnita derav Sheshet. So when we're to two dots on the top of Samach Zayin on Aleph, so whenever Rav Chisda and Rav Sheshet would meet each other, Rav Chisda's lips would start to tremble based on the teachings of Rav Sheshet, meaning that Rav Chisda was extremely impressed by Rav Sheshet's teachings. Rav Sheshet mirta kule gufe mipul pule de Rav Chisda. So, all right. On the other hand, Rav Sheshet entire body would shake based on the sharpness of the pilpul of the back and forth arguments of Rav Chisda. This is simply stating, as background, stating how, even though Rav Chisda and Rav Sheshet often are arguing, showing how much respect they had for each other and how impressed each of them were by each other's Torah. So now we've got one of these stories where they are just trying to discuss the halacha. Rav Chisda asked Rav Sheshet. So we're going back to the multiple homes case, and we'll see what happened. And we're going to. So let me share that with everybody. Here we go. So here we're currently diagram 12. Okay, so we have so people have built up along the highway. As you may have seen, you may see it in certain old cities. You won't really see it nowadays because nobody would ever want to put their house directly under the Rabin because it would be extremely dangerous. But back in the day, it would be similar to having your house right on very close to the street on the side street. Sure, there might be some noise, but back then nobody would ever travel at night because it would be really dangerous. So you wouldn't really be so bothered by that. But it's convenient to not have to step through the mud to get to the main road. Rather, you'd be right on the nice road straight away. So somebody had this set up, a house on each side. Right, so you have the houses on each side. So what happens is, well, it's Shabbos, you're just minding your business. You've got your two houses on each side. And then all of a sudden, non-Jews decided, you know what, we're going to put up a fence here because we don't want to, and why they did that? Maybe they want to do construction for those who, or maybe they, simply were worried about some bandits coming in, and they decided that we should block off the road now. And inadvertently, you now find yourself having full walls. The question is, what's the case? Can I carry now? Is this now a valid area for my disposal or not? So so now we're going to go back to a discussion we had before about giving up rights, right? So does that mean that now, once something happened on Shabbos, can I rely on this, or am I still stuck saying that because it happened now, I can't? The Aliba demand Amar Ein Bittul Rashut Mechatzer Lechatzer Lo Tibailach. According to what you just said, that you can't renounce rights from one courtyard to another, there should be no issue. Amart in bittul reshut mechatzer lechatzer. Hacha de'iba l'aruve met lo matzim arve lo again. So right. So the question is, right. So what's going? So why would this be okay? So if you normally would allow, if normally somebody says that you could never give up your rights to your area on Shabbos, then it makes sense why this should be forbidden. There's no problem. It's forbidden because just like I can't do batal rishus, I also can't fix a rishus on Shabbos. Or just like I can't give up my rights, I also can't. Any wall that happens now, it can't help me. It simply is what it is. Right? And why is it the case? Because so now in our case, well, if you wanted to have made your Eruv yesterday, and we would have said you can't do so. We would have told you, Amart, ein bittul reshut mechatzer lechatzer. You can't renounce the rights from one to the other one. So that's what that was our discussion yesterday about how you can't, when you have two areas that are forbidden that connect, you can't negate from one to the other one. It has to be one area that's allowed to steer to make an Eruv in which there's one person who forgot. That's the only time bittul reshut can come into play. So here, where even if you wanted to make an Eruv yesterday, you couldn't make an Eruv because you had no walls to work with. So you would not say it's a kol shekain, it's a kol v'chomer, and there's no way that you could make an Eruv today, even if there happen to be walls. You could say, I couldn't make the Eruv yesterday, so even if today there magically are walls, it doesn't matter because there was no Eruv before. There can't be the Eruv now, therefore I can't carry now. So then who would say that maybe you could carry in such a situation, or all of a sudden there's magically walls pop up around you? This would work. The person who says on Shabbos you can negate from one courtyard to another courtyard.
So Rabbi, just bear with me for one quick second because I'm not sure I followed. My mind may have wandered. It's early. When did these fences go up that the non-Jews put up there?
On Shabbos. You went to sleep and you woke up in the morning and there are fences in front of you.
And those fences are good for you with respect to an Eruv, but they didn't exist before Shabbos. Is that the issue?
Correct. They're full, strong, they're full walls. They're not like, just, like a couple of cones.
So they're not temporary construction walls. They're good, solid walls.
I mean,
and if they'd been there before Shabbos, they would have been fine for you to make an Eruv there. And you didn't put them there, the non-Jews did, but now the question is, can you use them because they weren't there before Ben Moses or whatever?
Correct, right?
Okay, okay, thank you.
Exactly. Quick explanation. So, right, the question, what can we do now? Can we use it now that the walls are here, even though they weren't here earlier? So, the part of the purchaser says that on Shabbos you could give up your rights, even from one courtyard to another courtyard. That would imply that you can affect something for the purposes of using an Eruv even on Shabbos. So the Hadam, meaning the other case, right? The case we had of the bittul reshut from one courtyard to another courtyard. Eve ba'ul aruvemi etwal matzum ma'arve. Betule nami matzim mevatel. Aval hacha the lo matzum ma'arve etwal betule nami lo matzim mevatel. So the question will then be the case where you could normally negate your usage of an area from one courtyard to another courtyard. That should be fine. So the question is that, so in that case, I understand why, you can give your rights and you can end up in the Eruv can work. Maybe that you can carry now because it's now all owned by one individual. That works because even though I didn't make even though I haven't negated, even though I didn't negate yesterday, I didn't make my Eruv yesterday, but I could have. I just simply didn't get around to it. And that's not a mistake. But there's a solution. There's bittul that you could do to allow you to carry by one person giving up the rights to the other person. But here, there's no option on Eruv Shabbos of having an Eruv. You simply couldn't. Now, if you want to do bittul, it's not going to work. Dilma loshna, or we say that no, it doesn't matter if you couldn't. That as long that your cases are the same, that both cases are you should have been an Erev before. And even if the circumstances would have allowed it now, we won't let you do it on Shabbos. So Amar Light, so Rosh Hashanah says Survesta, and Mevatlin, who says somebody cannot negate their rights in the case of two Chatzerot. So therefore, there's no way for, even if the non-Jews put up their fences on Shabbos, there is no way for you now to carry, even though there happens to be walls there right now. So if they put it up before Shabbos, that'd be a different story. But on Shabbos, once the circumstances are as they are, you can't fix them. And the case of Bittul is a unique case where where somebody forgot, but that wouldn't apply our case here of the non-Jews putting up walls for you on Shabbos. Walls magically appeared. Now we're going to see another case of, is there a way for you to use the area which was forbidden to you from before Shabbos? So, what happens if the non-Jew lived in your courtyard, dies on Shabbos? So, are you allowed to now carry, even though you had a rent from him prior, or not? What's the story? So, Aliba demand Amar Sochrin Loti Bailach. Hashta Tarjavdinan Chadam Abaya. So, the opinion who said that one can rent from a non-Jew on Shabbos when he shows up. There lets you do two things, right? It lets you end up renouncing rights one to the other, from one Jew to another Jew, at the same time would let you rent from a non-Jew even on Shabbos. So are you going to really ask me what the story is now when there is just me? Now in our case, all you're doing is renouncing, because beforehand we did make our error because we forgot to rent for the non-Jew. Now there's only Jews left, and we can go back in our courtyard, so we can go back to the normal status of, well, you can always do bittul. But we'll let you do that, whereas before we said, again, we let you rent and do bittul. So now the non-Jew is dead, and all we have left to do is bittul. So should it work? So you're right. So according to that opinion, that will be fine. So what's the problem then? The issue is the person who says you're not allowed to rent on Shabbos from non-Jews. You're right. We won't let you both do bittul and do a rental on Shabbos. Normally, not allowed to do business transactions on Shabbos, but this is not a true transaction, so we'll let it slide. So but if there's only one thing, meaning i.e. all you have to do to fix the issue is now do bittul, since the non-Jew is dead, then maybe it could work. Or you'd say, no, you should have done it before Shabbos. If you didn't do it before Shabbos, you're stuck. So Rosh Hashanah says that in this case, I say you would be allowed to, right? You'd be allowed to do bittul one to the other if the non-Jew died, but Rav Hamnuna says you can't. So as far as so what's the answer to the question? If the non-Jew dies on Shabbos, is there a way for some people to be able to carry in your courtyard? So according to Rav Sheshet, yes, because that's only one act, because bittul can be done even on Shabbos, as long as the non-Jew isn't in the way anymore. Whereas Rav Hamnuna says no, it all comes down to, could you have done this before Shabbos? If the answer is no, then you still can't. So now we're going to have a new case. Again, now we're moving on. We're shifting diagrams as well. Okay, so now we're moving on to diagram number 15. So Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Koi sheyesh lo petach arba al arba patuach lebik'ah. Afilu machnis l'mufsik malim ukronot kol hayom kulo derech mavoy ein oser al bnei mavoy. So now we're talking about a case with alternative exits and whether or not that creates an issue for our Eruv. So if there's a non-Jew who has and then there's, so we have a lot of Jews living around an alleyway, and then there's a non-Jew who has two entrances to his home. He has the entrance that leads into the alleyway, but he also has the direct exit leading out of the city. Right? He's got a front door and a back door. Everybody else only has a front door. So now let's say the question, and so we say, so since there's a valid back door, so therefore, so we discussed about the case of if you have somebody has to go through a certain area, whether that generates an issue or not. Right? That if somebody has to go through and has to exit through the mavoy or through the chatzer, then that'll generate an issue for the rest of the members surrounding the area. So here, this non-Jew, sure, he could walk through the middle of the Jews, the mavoy, wherever else is using. He doesn't have to. He can just simply go around, and therefore we don't actually need to render him before Shabbos. So, in this case, even if it happens to be the non-Jew decided that this Shabbos, what's he going to be doing all Shabbos? He's got tons of shipments coming in. He's got camels, he's got wagons. They're coming in the whole day long to the entrance of your mavoy. So, it would not create a problem for the rest of the people of the mavoy. Or the rest of the people in the alleyway. I mean, if they made their shituf or they made their Eruv before, and all of a sudden the non-Jew decides to get, to start, make sure to, says that Shabbos is going to be his day of business, and he's going to, have all his camel drivers and all of their wagons, everything else coming on through. Eruv will still work.
So I'm trying to see, Rabbi, where in the diagram his other exit is.
Oh, is it not?
Yeah,
Oh.
I didn't see either. Yeah.
Oh, here. So here it has it being this small little window here.
So that's an exit.
This is a small little foxhole exit.
And that's where he lives, and he can exit there, so he doesn't have to come through that main entrance where the wagons are.
Even though it's a small entrance, only 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim. So because he has, again, this isn't a place where you can do real major moving of things, but it's basically, let's say if you have think like having a garbage chute, or if you remember in the good old days, these dudes have little dumb waiters to bring up their food from room service.
Yep.
So it's a way for you to transfer things outside in an easy way, but not necessarily your big shipping goods.
Okay.
So that's guy over here. So what that means so it's at least 4 by 4. So the minimum size for an entrance or an exit is 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim.
So he doesn't even have to be able to leave by that. It has to be just an access point, like for commerce or whatever.
Correct. It doesn't need to be a person exit. It needs to be a usage exit. In theory, so
that sounds like a window would work too.
In fact, the window could work also, assuming that it's
opens up completely and is big enough to pass stuff through.
Correct, which tends to go against your initial logic, but then we say for purposes also for Tuma as well that if you have an open when we say window, we mean a window with no closing it in, like an actual open window. There's no screen. There's no
yes.
There's no glass. There's no
objects
shutter.
can be passed easily through.
You could they could give access out through. Now, so this case works. So my timer, because even though this this doorway or this window is very small, this is his exclusive doorway, we say that he'd rather exit and enter through the small cubbyhole, right, little exit there. He'd rather use that than have to keep on walking through the area that has all of the Jews and everybody else there. He'd rather have his privacy, even if it's a little inconvenient. He'd rather use the little door to get in from the side. So, Ibailu. So now we're going to question this assumption. Is it really based on the fact that it's an open window, or is it based on where this leads to? Right? Does it matter? Because in the Beit we quoted in the statement of Rabbi Yehuda name of Shmuel, it was talking about being open to the valley, the Bika. Now we're going to see, does it matter where the little opening opens to? Would it be different if it opened to a different type of place? right? Is it only good because it opens up to the valley? It's his secret exit, to the country, or is it because it's an exit that's not in the Mavoi?
That would be Carmelite.
Yes, a bika would be a Carmelite. Yes, a bika is a valley, not the place it's currently resided in, and it's considered to be a not fully restricted Rabim. It's considered to be a Carmelite, meaning it's a category that Midrash is in between a that has features of Rishut Rabim. So again, that's our circumstance. So now now the question is it related to the fact of where it's opening into, the type of place? Is that relevant, or only the fact that he has his own separate exit that's relevant? That's the question. So Amar Nachman Barami, which made opena a fila batuach a carpe. So, right. So the question was, what if it's open to a carpe? Remember, a carpe is an enclosure which isn't necessarily so useful, right? It's not like it doesn't open up fully to everything. It could just be, like it could be, an enclosed courtyard. It could be it could be into a construction zone. It could be into, into a park. Not necessarily directly into a place that would be as useful as the Mavoi does. The Mavoi is, a main alleyway that leads to the rest of the cities in the town. But Carpave sometimes could be a far less useful area. Would that work or not? So Nachman says yes. Right? He says he had he says he has a tradition, right? Mishmei Opana. Right, not that he learned it out from from his years in Opana wrote. Rather, it's from his years when he was learning. Right, Opana is Aramaic for teachings. So is in the name of his teachers. They taught him that that as long as he considers the main entrance, even if it's not as convenient as opening up into the main alleyway, that's still enough of an opening for the non-Jew to not forbid you. So, on the other hand, we've got, again, we're on Amud now. So, Rabba Rav Yosef to Amri Tarbayu. So, Rabba Rav Yosef have a different answer. Koi Beit Satayim Oser. Yocher Beit Satayim Eno Oser. Right. So the question is when do we say that the non-Jew having his own private enclosure will help us, even if it's not necessarily an enclosure that's right. So depending on how big his backyard is whether or not we're talking about a case of people we're move back to the ancient context, right? Ancient context of people when their use of their houses weren't exclusive, would use their houses in conjunction with a chatzer or with a mavoi, because if you only have your house, it's considered to be unlivable. There's not enough space to do what you need to do. Between doing your laundry, cooking, whether sewing, or again all the other functions that somebody would need to do in the Talmudic times, it's not going to be a livable situation. So you need to have all these other amenities. So the amenity you need to have in order to live is you need to have an available chatzer of big enough space to do your daily needs. So the question is, how big must the separate carpet, which could be a dead end, right? It could be an enclosed yard, but it's not necessarily as useful as a chatzer or a mavoi would be, as a courtyard, as a courtyard or an alleyway would be. So depending on that size, will depend on whether or not the non-Jew will end up using his default exercising his usage rights of the courtyard end of the alleyway or not. So goy beit satayim oser. So if the non-Jew, like his carpe and backyard is beit satayim or less, meaning it's again less than 70 by 70. 70 by 70 and 2/3, right? So it's less than that area of Beit Satayim. Then he'll still want his usage of the main courtyard because that isn't quite big enough for him. But Yoter Beit Time Inuos there. But if he's got a really big enclosure over there, then he will not end up using the main area. Yisrael Beit Time Inuos there. But for a Jew, if he has Beit Time, that's enough, right? Jews have lesser standards for how big they need to have their backyards, right? You know, if it's 2 Beit, that's also good enough. On the other hand, if it's Yoter Beit Time was there, but if it's more than 2, it'll create a problem. So, right? So so now we're going to think, wait, why would having too big of a yard be a problem for a Jew? So the answer is that if your yard is too large, you have the issue you can't make an Eruv around the yard, right? If you have a karpef, meaning a fallow area with no usage and no designated purpose that is greater than a Beit time, the 2 Beit, and it would prevent you from carrying in that whole region. So this would mean that if you actually sometimes having too big of a yard, it could be a problem. This would be for a yard that's not meant to be used, but not for a designated or yard that has a usage. Right? A karpef is an area that is a type of carmelite as well. Again, an area that's forbidden to be used midrabanan. So, and it's an area that generally that is really not accessible and not used. If it was a place, let's say, if you had designated it as your backyard, where you normally have you have parties, host lunches there, it would no longer be an issue. The issue is when it's simply a completely unused area. Let's say like a construction zone, pre-construction being done. Let's say you're landscapers are in the middle of fixing up your backyard, right? They took all the grass out, they took out all of your everything that you normally would use, and now all you've got is you basically got a giant hole in your backyard, right? Right? You've got it's all dug up, it's not nice, you wouldn't really use it, it's yours, but like in that situation, now render your backyard to be a karpef, and it could be problematic for you to carry within your backyard. So in that context, it would be an issue. But for a non-Jew, right, it wouldn't be an issue because the non-Jew creates an Eruvin issue, but as far as an all versus usage issue, it wouldn't create. So therefore, for a Jew, that'd be an issue. For a non-Jew, it would not be an issue. It's a little weird, but that's the way it would break up. So, so now we're going to go back and question the case of where does the non-Jew's entrance lead? So ba'amine relabak mirafuna tuel karpef mahu. So again, the Gentiles' courtyard is opening up into a karpef. So what's the case? So Amrle. All right. So again, this is a discussion separate to our previous discussion. That happened at another point. That's going to discuss a similar issue. It's going to discuss our issue as well. So Amrle, Hare Amru. It's a time was there. It's a time. Was there. This question came up later, and Rava quoted his answer from our discussion that it depends on the size of the non-Jews region. If it's Beit time or less, it's a problem. But if it's more than Beit time, then the non-Jew will not forbid everyone else's usage of the alleyway. Amar Ula, Amar B'Yochanan, Koter. So now we're going back to discuss what we mean by karpef and why that doesn't work. So Amar Ula, Amar B'Yochanan, karpef yotzir mebeit satayim shalohu kaf l'tira, afilu korayim hazor l'toch hachayav. So Ula said in B'Yochanan that a karpef, meaning that an enclosure that is large, again, the enclosure with no purpose, that is larger than Beit Satayim, that's bigger than 2 Beitzahs, that has not been fenced in is for purposes of anybody using it yet. That's our case of somebody doing landscaping in their backyard and it's not yet fully finished. They don't have all the fences up. It's not yet meant for usage. So now we say no matter how big it is, afilu korayim. If anybody were to throw, even if it's the size of a core or korayim, which is many times bigger than a beitza. So then, if you threw from your house into that carpet, into that carpet, you'd be over on Zah, because it's considered to be an area that's got the status of a Carmelite and fully forbidden to carry in. My time out. So why is that the case? Because even if it happens to currently have walls, right? Even if the walls are up around the carpet, the issue is that it's missing people use the usage of it, residents, and therefore you can't carry inside of it, and therefore it's asur midrabanan to carry inside of there. So then that's the issue. Even though there is walls around it, it creates an issue. So mativ Rav Huna bar Chinana sela shebayam kavoa asara v'rochav arba'a ein matalto lo mitocho layam lo minayam latocho pachot mikan ataltlin ad kama ad beit zatayim. So now the question, now we've got a different case of talking about an area that is a Rishut HaYachid interacting with a status, something that has the status of a Carmelite, again, something that is forbidden to be used midirabanan, because of its similarity to being a Rishut HaRabim. So now we have a case where you have a rock that is 10 tvachim out of the water, while being 4 tvachim wide. So we say you're not allowed to carry from it, which is a Rishut HaYachid. Let me scroll down in the diagram so we can see the picture of the. Yeah, this is an example of a karpef. Any enclosure. It could look like your backyard a little bit. But the point being, this is something that doesn't have any structures built up and isn't ready for any particular usage, which is why it's a big issue as a karpef. And now we're on our case of you've got a little outcropping in the ocean here. Okay, so this is our issue. So, right, so you're not allowed to carry you can't carry from this rocky outcropping, this platform, to the water or back. Or in modern case, let's say if you had you had your dock that happens to be not a floating dock, but a dock that's actually, or this, it could be a floating dock too. As long as it's 10 tvachim tall and it's 4 tvachim wide, then you can't carry things from the water, from the ocean into it, and vice versa. But if the rocky outcropping is smaller than 4 tvachim by 4 tvachim and less than 10 tvachim tall, it's not considered to be a separate Rishut HaYachid, and you could carry. Ad kama ad beit zatayim. Right, so then we're saying, is there a maximum size of the rock that would generate an issue that would mean that's no longer considered to be a separate area? We say the maximum size for the rock to be considered to be its own separate area, its own separate Rishut HaYachid, is the area of Beit Zatayim. So now, is that really so Beit Zatayim referring to the first half or the second half? Are they saying prefer the maximum size of the rock or the maximum size of the sea? If you're saying, to the case of the size of the rock, right? So if you say that the rock itself is something that got much bigger, so then that means that you could carry from a Carmelite to another Carmelite, again, which we say is there's that. You can't carry long distance. You can't carry more than Dalet Amo within a Carmelite, but you could carry, let's say, you have up to 4 Amo. So let's say if you happen to have the rock on the very edge of one Carmelite to another Carmelite, it wouldn't be forbidden. Because, but once you change between different regions, then any amount of travel is problematic. So, meaning, if I transfer from my house into the Rishut HaRabim, even though I moved it, let's say, only a couple inches, right, a couple centimeters, I have violated But if I were to have moved it in Rosh Hashanah, a couple, like, the same distance, as long as the distance is less than Daled Amot, again, less than 2 meters, then I would not have violated anything. Right? Because in order to violate from one region to another region, right, that means that you switch from a Rishut Yachid to Rishut Rabim, or from a Rishut Yachid to a Carmelite, or again, from Carmelite to Rishut Rabim, or from between different regions. But if you were to have moved within a region, even in a region that you can't carry, such as a Rishut Rabim or a Carmelite, you are not in violation until you cross the 4 amot distance. So Ella Lava Ratio. Rather, it's referring to the first half of the BAYT. And then what are we learning out then? This is what it means to say. If you have a rock in the ocean that's 10 tvachim tall and 4 tvachim wide, you can't carry from the ocean to it or vice versa. Odd Beit time. Right. So when is a case you can't carry? You can't carry when it's too small. Right. When the rock is considered to be Rishut Yachid, then you can't carry from the ocean to it. But if the rock is big enough, and once your rock is now more than Beit time, you're allowed to carry. Why? Which implies that at a certain point that you can turn that this outcropping in the water becomes a Carmelite. Give to Rabbi Yochanan, right? And that's Rabbi Yochanan is wrong, right? Because that means to see that in this case right here, it becomes big enough, then it can solve our issue, right? Because then you're going from Carmelite to Carmelite, which is not an issue of but only if the guy standing on the edge did it, because he's moving less than the guy in the middle would not be allowed to. So Amarava, Mon lo yada tzrutze matnita Tayufta le Rabbi Yochanan. The Rebbe said, no, only one who doesn't understand Mishnayot would ever question Rabbi Yochanan's greatness. So Olam Aresha, no. Really, it's referring to the case of the. We're not talking about carrying from the water to from the rock to the water. Rather, the case is talking about within the rock itself. This is what I'm going to say. Havatocho mataltalin. Akama ad Beit time. Rather, the original Mishnah that we've been quoting was talking about what point, what's the maximum size for this to be considered to be a private area. And we say that the maximum size is 2 Beits, and that's our limit. So Ravashi Amar Olam Aresha, rather it's referring to the first half. Hein Amru. So no, it could be referring to the first half, but there still are 2 opinions, that of Rabbi Yochanan and that of the Chamim. So therefore, it could be either referring to the maximum area for carrying on the rock, as well as the maximum area for which you're allowed to unload and unload from the sea into the rock. So right, so what do we mean by that? So Hein Amru, what's one of the sides? Karpef yoter mi Beit Zatayim lo kafladira ematat limbo el arba'amo. So it teaches us that if you have a case of the enclosure that is larger than Beit Zatayim, it is not properly fenced in, you can't carry the whole region. Rather, you're limited only to Daled Amot, just like you would be in Rishut Rabim. Ein Amru ematat and Rishut Yachid the Carmelite. And the other opinion says you can't carry from a Rishut Yachid to a Carmelite. That's how we could explain both of them in the context of the BAYT we had earlier. And both of these would then be Zerek Midrabanan, and that's why they work, not because of any other laws we have of Eruvin, just simply because they work as they work, because of a rabbinic decree of them being too similar to Rishut Rabim. Yoter Beit Zatayim to us al totu bekule. Sharibanu l'tukle v'kutukol yam u'minyam l'toko. So in the case where the rock is very large, we allow you to where you can't carry in the rock, but we allow you to carry from the rock to the sea. My time, why is that the case? Dilma Amri, Rashid Yasik Mori Heave, Adil Tulte Bukule. So why do we say that you're making that the zero when it normally was allowed prior? So because people might get confused and say that this is a Rashid Yasik, this rock. And therefore, they'll end up, once you let you unload, and therefore you make a mistake. What's the difference? Is that people normally carry within a region of a rock. Most people aren't unloading and unloading from a rock into the ocean. That's not normal practice. And similarly, right? Again, so you would normally carry on a rock, you wouldn't necessarily unload, and that's why they made Xer Durban. Okay, so okay, it looks like we are running out of time. So I'm going to try and get so again, I'm going to sum up, and then I'll see if I can squeeze in the next. Actually, we'll speak from how you look at it tomorrow. Again, we'll be continuing at the same time, 6:40. And we will be right, and they'll hopefully continue on with the schedule. Please let me know if this works or doesn't work. Okay, so let me just sum up what we covered today. So we covered today was we were talking about carrying. We're talking about the first cases we had were here. Let's do it off of the diagrams. Here we go. So the first case we had was the question of if walls were put up on Shabbos for you, can you use it or not? Are you allowed to make an Eruv, and using the logic of, are you allowed to make an Eruv on Shabbos or not? That was the first discussion we had. And whether or not the walls put up by non-Jews are effective or not. And comparing it to our case before of renting or negating your access, your ability to use an area on Shabbos. The next case we had was the question of access and saying how if somebody had the non-Jew has another access point, he'd prefer to use that even if it's slightly more inconvenient. He would prefer that than using the main alleyway, and how that could benefit the people residing in the alleyway. And then we spoke about the case of about what are you allowed to carry in your usage of you have the backyard enclosure over here, which isn't necessarily set up properly yet for usage. It's not meant to be used for your house. It's simply just an empty area. Is that an area that you're allowed that's considered to be useful for the non-Jew versus for the Jew? When we said for the non-Jew it has to be bigger than BAYT that time for it to be useful, but for Jews smaller is more useful. Then we discussed the case of carrying to it from Iraq and how it comes down to whether or not that the rock is when it's a Rishon Yachid versus when it's a Carmelite. And also we discussed how the reason why you can't carry on the rock and can't float in and out of the water is based on Xeret B'Drabanans of your being confused between Rishon Yachid and Carmelite in general, and we don't want you to start making any mistakes. Why we would forbid you to carry once it's at the entirety of the rock once it's at above a certain region, or unload at that point as well. Okay. That's it for today, and hopefully I'll see everybody tomorrow.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks. See you tomorrow.
Tomorrow.